class. Welcome back to the History of Christianity. Last time we looked at the Puritan movement and a little bit on Reformed Orthodoxy, and today we're going to look at the topic of rationalism and how that had an impact on Christianity. Stay tuned for the PowerPoint. Okay, class, we're going to have our PowerPoint portion of this video on the rationalist. So what is rationalism? It's a philosophical belief system characterized by its interest in the world and the powers of reasoning. So this is going to bring us to the age of enlightenment or the age of reason, and it's going to have some impact on religious beliefs. This takes place between the 17th and 18th centuries. It transforms human thought to use reason to transform or change the world. Everything is through pure rational analysis. So reason and individualism goes over tradition. So again, before the Enlightenment, you had it was all based on faith. It was all about the church. It was all about the Catholics or whatever it was. It was all about this traditional religious side of the society. Well, now during the Enlightenment, everything was through rational analysis, and reason and individualism would trump religion. You would be able to understand the natural world through thinking and reasoning. It challenged traditional religious views, and most thinkers were liberals of their day. So we're going to be looking at a couple of these thinkers. We first have Rene de Cartas, 1596 to 1650. And his rationalism. Now, he was French, and he used mathematical reasoning for the basis of his philosophy. So what he did was he said you have to start, in regards to reasoning, you have to start with universal doubt, discover what cannot be doubted, therefore you found absolute truth. Okay, so that was his purpose. And what he did was he began with himself. He began with the existence of man. And it started out with his own existence. And he says this very famous phrase, I think, therefore I am. So that phrase there gave him this baseline idea that man exists because he's thinking that he exists. So I think, therefore I am. He then takes that principle to bring in the existence of God. Again, this is all through reasoning. If man can think of something bigger than himself, so if God is bigger than man, and man is able to think of that concept that's bigger than him, he could not develop that thought himself. But that thought would have had to been placed in him by God. And if that thought was placed in him by God, then obviously God exists. Then he goes and proves through his reasoning the existence of the world. And that, in a nutshell, is based on the existence of God and this divine order. Therefore, the world exists. So that's just in a nutshell, real simple way of explaining it. And then he gets the existence of the body and soul, that the body occupies space, so it exists, but here's where he runs into some trouble. He had trouble trying to explain how the soul and the body can exist together. And so there's three ideas that come out of this, and it's not that he developed these three ideas, there were others that developed it, but three possible ways that the body and soul can exist together. Now, all of these ways were criticized, so it's not that like one is better than another or something like that. They're all kind of a little bit difficult to understand, and a lot of it sets blame on God. So three possible ways. First is occasionalism, and this is where God moves every action of the person. And so that really wasn't all that accepted because it blamed God for all the evil. So basically, God is the puppet master, and people are the puppets. And whatever the person does is because the puppet master moved them to do it. Second is monism. And this is advocated by Spinoza. You may have heard of him. He's another philosopher, Spinoza. It's not a soul and body, as in two substances, but just one substance. Okay, so the first one Occasionalism is that the body and soul are controlled by God, like the puppet master. The second one is that they're not separate like body and soul, but it's just one substance. And so the example from monism is it's like the red and the round are attributes of the one substance called an apple. But that doesn't work out so well because of what red and round they can mean. They can be attributes of other things that won't be an apple. So it did not gain a lot of support there from monism. And then there's pre-established harmony. This is where the body and soul do not communicate with one another, but there is a pre-established order set by God. And the example for best understanding this is like clocks in a clock shop or a clock store. They're all working independent of each other. Each clock is keeping time by itself, but they were all set and show the same time according to the clock maker. And so the clock maker is, i.e., God. And so again, criticism came that it blamed God for evil. So just a couple different ways to try to reason and try to understand the body and soul coming together and how they function with each other. And it really doesn't come to a conclusion for any of it. Just some ideas were put out there about how this works. So that's Descartes' rationalism. Next is John Locke, 1632 to 1704, and his empiricism. He's English, and empiricism means experiences. So all knowledge that man has is derived from experiences. And this knowledge can be gained from personal experiences, from outer realities which are outside of man, and then from God, whose existence is proven by the existence of self and knowledge. So if man exists and has knowledge, something happened for man to exist. And so the concept is that God created man and has given them the ability to have knowledge. And Locke is saying that you can have this knowledge through experiences. And he also said you must use judgment and reason to measure what is believed by faith. Okay, so again, that can be, some things you just have to have faith in, and it's not able to be reasoned other than it's just faith. But he said you can use judgment and reason to measure what is believed. The next we're going to talk about is deism. Now, deism, they were also called the free thinkers. They said true religion must be universal because there is God over the world, but they opposed many of the narrow beliefs of most of the branches of Christianity at the time. They rejected those beliefs. They rejected atheism, so they rejected that extreme of no God, but they also rejected the narrow belief of God being involved in the world and sending Jesus to the world and all of that. They said belief in God by reason instead of revelation. So through reason, it discounted the significance of revelation. So if you are discounting revelation, you are definitely going to discount the significance of Jesus Christ because he's God incarnate and he came to reveal God to the world. And so if you are rejecting the revelation of Jesus Christ, then you're basically going to get into this deistic idea of God created the world and now it's just out there spinning with him not even involved in it. Well, this belief of deism was criticized by David Hume, and there are founding fathers of the United States who were deists. They believed in this deistic idea. Okay, so David Hume, 1711 to 1776, and his empirical skepticism. Now, he was Scottish, and he was skeptical of most of the philosophical beliefs that were out there. He was just a skeptic. He said true knowledge was much more limited than the rationalists said you could have. He focused on empirical skepticism, which basically, again, is the experiences. This is our example with an apple. All man sees are the attributes given to it. Okay, so you see the color, you see the shape, you see the weight, you see that you can smell it, whatever you can, with your senses. There's an apple there, and we say that's an apple because of its color and shape and weight. So all of these attributes put together is then defined as an apple. Now, experience does not allow one to have knowledge of individual attributes because you can't experience an attribute such as round or red and come up with an apple. Again, you can say round and it could be a ball, or red and it could be a ball. So if you have you really can't experience the attribute of round. So he criticized this. So likewise, according to Hume, one cannot experience and gain knowledge of the soul or of God because one cannot know the substance beyond the attribute given to it. So he is saying that all man can know about God is basically the attribute about who God is. So you won't even really know God. You only know the attribute. Next is Voltaire, 1694 to 1778. He was the common sense guy. He used reason for common sense, and common sense dictates one's life. And maybe by now it's like, yeah, that's the way to go. Just have some common sense. But really what he did was he got down into attacking the institutions, such as the monarchy, which that might be okay, but also he attacked the church. And he said that there should be a separation of church and state. He did believe in religious freedom, but he criticized Christianity. And he even did try to stamp out Bibles and get rid of Bibles. But he had a heavy focus on individual freedom. So just Voltaire's, he was French, just some of his thoughts there. But he was more on common sense, and he did criticize Christianity pretty heavily. And we get to our last guy, Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804. He was German, and he gave a radical alternative to the way thinking was taking place. He said that there is a structure to the mind where one hangs their ideas. So that's what he kind of pictured the mind as a structure, and you hang your ideas on it. So the structures that's in the mind is time and space and existence and substance, etc. The only way to have something thinkable is to hang the data on the structure, and then one has an experience with that. So if you have all of these things that, round, red, that smells like an apple, you hang all of those things on this structure in your mind, you can come to have an experience with the apple, and you can say it's an apple. Well, he said things do not exist in and of themselves, but what the structure in the mind is able to grasp. So again, you can't just say red and come up with an apple. You had to have these things hanging there, and then you can grasp the idea of an apple. This process is critical of traditional Christian thought, because how can the eternity concept, which is absent of time, exist in a framework of a mind which is in time? So that was one of his big things with eternity. How can you understand eternity when our mind is in time, but eternity is outside of that? Well, he said that because of his thinking, it affects how man thought of God and of salvation, etc. How can you think on these things? His point was that pure reason cannot know these concepts. Kant did not delve too deep into religious matters, but he did say that practical reasoning can lead to moral choices based on a universal moral rule, which can show the existence of God, i.e. the moral lawgiver. But he said that you can't just know about God, about salvation, about eternity through pure reason. It was only through a practical reasoning that you could know God. So this is that's Immanuel Kant, and that's it for our study of the rationalists. I'll see you in a second. Okay, class, that's it for today. Next time we are going to look at Spiritism and Pietism. Have a great day.